So I think we're going to get started here today. Welcome to the Forward in Energy Forum. We appreciate everyone joining us today in the room and online. My name is Lulu Fregoso. I'm one of the Education and Outreach Assistants at the Wisconsin Energy Institute here at UW-Madison. Welcome to those of you who are returning forum attendees, and if this is your first time joining us for one of our events, we're really glad that you're here. The Wisconsin Energy Institute's mission is to provide the leadership on campus for multidisciplinary research, education, and outreach efforts that accelerate our transition to clean energy systems and solutions. The Forward in Energy Forum is a monthly series that brings together experts both on and off campus for cross-disciplinary dialogue exploring important technical, social, political, and economic dimensions of a wide variety of clean energy innovations and topics. Today's forum is on AI's energy future, balancing growth, the grid, and environment. First, we want to acknowledge that the land that WEI occupies, as well as all of UW-Madison, is the ancestral home of the Ho-Chunk people, who have called this land Daeshop since time immemorial. We recognize and respect the inherent sovereignty of the Ho-Chunk Nation and the other 11 Native nations within the boundaries of what we now call Wisconsin. Please take time to learn more about and support the efforts of tribal nations in Wisconsin and beyond who are leading the transition toward clean and just energy systems. Next, we would like you to save the date for our next Forward in Energy Forum called Empowering Consumers Navigating the Switch to Clean Energy Technologies. We're excited to explore how Wisconsinites can decarbonize their lifestyles and make decisions that are financially and environmentally friendly. And this will be happening on February 25th. Finally, a couple of logistical notes. We'll have opening remarks from our panelists and some Q&A with our moderator before taking audience questions. For people who are joining us on Zoom, please submit your questions in the Q&A box. Finally, if you need live captioning, you can toggle that feature by clicking the On Show Captions button in Zoom. If you have any other technical concerns, please let us know in the chat. To moderate today's panel, I'm pleased to introduce Lena Rold. Rold is an associate professor in electrical and computer engineering at UW-Madison. Rold's research focuses on modeling and optimization of energy systems to ensure reliable grid operations as renewable sources, as the solar and wind replace traditional forms of generation such as coal and nuclear. Her group is developing mathematical tools and software implementations to model and optimize system operation and energy markets, while taking into account the impact of uncertain events such as variations in renewable energy production, component failures, and large-scale outages. We are very grateful to have her with us and to set the stage for today's discussion. Thank you.
Right. Well, thank you very much, Lulu, and thank you to everyone who's here. It's really exciting to be in a room full of people. That is always great. And we are also really grateful to everyone who's joining us online. I can see we have close to 100 participants there also right now. So as Lulu said, I'm an associate professor in the Department of Electrical and Computer Engineering, and I work on electric power grids. And in recent years have also taken an increasing interest in data centers and their impact on the energy system. So I'm really happy to be here today to be able to explore these questions that are so pressing along with our four panelists here. So we're really grateful for everyone who's joining us today, both online and in person. And what we are observing is that as the use of AI grows, we are seeing that it is having a larger and larger energy footprint, both from training AI models and also from the use of them afterwards. We know that AI touches on energy resources, as is the topic here today, but it also has significant impact on our water resources, implications for national security and international competitiveness. And what we also know is that things are really developing at a breakneck pace. So just in the last week, I guess the context for this conversation almost has shifted a bit. We've seen enormous announcements of enormous new investments in data center infrastructure, and at the same time also news of new AI models from China that are doing things with less energy and different kind and less advanced chips than what we have been doing here in this country. And so to make sense of all of this, thankfully we have our distinguished panelists here. So we will be hearing from Matt Sinclair of UW-Madison, Costas Amaras from Carnegie Mellon University, Tyler Hubner from Google, and Amy Barillo from Clean Wisconsin. So we'll do a little bit more detailed introductions as we're going down here, but I want you to just, maybe we can take a moment to just be happy that they are here with us today. So thank you. Yeah, let's clap. All right, so we will start out here with some remarks from everyone, and we'll start with Matt, who is an assistant professor in the Department of Computer Sciences at UW-Madison. He's also an affiliate faculty member of the Electrical and Computer Engineering Department and the Teaching Academy at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. He works in computer architecture, so he really knows a lot about the hardware and the workloads and everything that is going on inside those data centers, and will be telling us a bit more about that today as well. He's won large number of awards, a very distinguished researcher. So Matt, we are very happy that you're here with us today. Thank you.
Thanks for having me. Yeah. I should mention up front that two of these students sitting here, one of whom has won the WEI scholarship last year. They're the ones doing all the real work. So if people have questions, afterwards, they're the ones who actually know all the real answers here. But nonetheless, yeah, I'm super excited to be here and chat at least for a couple minutes about the work on designing hardware to meet the demands of ML and AI. Can you go to the next slide, please? So since I'm the first one, I felt, and I know folks are coming from many different areas and spaces, I felt important to think a little bit first about how and why ML is being applied to so many domains nowadays. And I think it's really because of the confluence of three key factors. First, we have massive amounts of data that are now available. Just to give you three ideas that I pulled off the internet, Facebook has over 350 million images being uploaded every day. Every minute of the day, if you can believe it, YouTube has over 500 hours of video being uploaded. And Walmart, every hour, they get 2.5 petabytes of new customer data that they want to work on and to parse through. And these are just three of the many, many examples that I'm sure each of you on your smart devices has currently running, each of which has similar amounts of data that they're parsing through. And to handle all of this and try and make a sense of it, we're embracing new machine learning techniques in a wide variety of contexts, ranging from speech translation and recognition, image recognition, recommendations, autonomous agents like self-driving cars, robotics, as well as even games like Go, shown in the bottom middle on the slide. And to power all of this, what we really need are pieces of hardware that are designed to run machine learning workloads really well. And in the past few years, let's say the last decade, we've increasingly seen that to be true. And what this has created is really a virtuous cycle of faster hardware able to run faster, bigger algorithms, which in turn needs more data to run and answer the kinds of questions that we have. Next slide, please. And to give you a bit of an idea of what machine learning is doing, you can really break it into two pieces. First, we have what we call the training phase. And what the training phase is doing is it's taking some sort of input. In this case, I've shown images, and you can see that we've labeled things in there. For example, dog in red, chairs in green, and a person in yellow. And we're going to pass those labeled data into some sort of machine learning algorithm, for example, a deep neural network or a DNN. And we're going to ask it to learn how to identify something about it. Say, is there a dog in a picture? And this is an iterative process. So over time, practitioners will go through and try to reduce the error to make it more accurate, better able to identify something, recommend something, etc. And once that's done, we will then go to the second phase, which is what we call inference, where we're giving it new pieces of data it's never seen before and asking it, say, is there a dog in this picture? Or any one of those other use cases I mentioned on the previous slide. Now, from a hardware perspective, the key thing is each of these algorithms we run, they require a series of calculations to be performed in order to answer whatever sort of question or questions we might have. And those questions consume a lot of energy, especially as models are growing in order to answer more complex questions. Next slide, please. And to give you an idea of what we're facing there, on the left here, I have a graph showing the computational requirements of, I'll pause here so we fix the technical difficulties. There we go. For relatively modern machine learning workloads. And on the gray line, sorry, on the y-axis, we have a logarithmic scale showing basically the amount of floating point operations or flops these workloads are requiring. And on the x-axis is time. And from 2012 to about 2019, we were growing at a pretty robust 8x every 2 years, which is a lot. But since 2018, it's really been supercharged, as shown in purple, where we're going at about 275x every 2 years. So just massive amounts of compute required to run and perform those calculations that we need. And on the right, one of my students and I, we started plotting out based on that graph on the left, what we thought future workloads would require. And we predicted by about the end of 2024, we'd be in the tens of trillions of parameters that we're passing in to teach these models how to identify things. Now, in the last couple of years, vendors have become a little bit more reticent about saying just how big their models are, so I can't perfectly fill in the gaps there. But to give you one data point, in 2023, the GPT-4 model that came out was at 1.7 trillion parameters to learn how to predict things in their model. So maybe not quite at the orange line you see here, but still we're seeing exponential growth in model size. And because of that, we just can't really run these workloads on any one computer. So we're increasingly splitting them to run across more and more computers in parallel to answer these really complex questions. And likewise, as Lena introduced at the beginning, this has had huge implications on energy consumption. So here, what this graph is showing is how much energy in the United States are data centers consuming in terms of terawatt hours per year. And every year up until about 2018, we were relatively flat, about 2% of all energy consumption in the United States. Around 2018, that has changed rapidly. Through 2023, we're already more than doubling that to 4.4%. And by 2028, we're expecting to be somewhere between 7 and 12% of all energy consumption in the United States. So this proportion is getting larger and larger. It's not a problem unique to the United States. Many other countries have the exact same issue. And while there's other workloads that are running in these data centers, machine learning is really fueling that increase. And to give you an idea of what that means, if we were to consider the energy requirements per year of one state-of-the-art NVIDIA H100 GPU versus the energy needs to continuously run one LED light bulb 24 hours a day for an entire year, it's about 43 times difference in terms of energy consumption. I'm not saying the two of them do the exact same amount of work, but keep in mind that even one out of the thousands of data centers in the US have tens of thousands of computers in them. And that gives you an idea of why these energy constraints and the consumption is just skyrocketing. So the bottom line is we're going to have to do something. Next slide, please. And in the hardware community, there's a whole host of vectors that people are pursuing. In particular, we're looking at ways to design more efficient hardware that can reduce energy needs relative to more general purpose processors like CPUs. And right now, there's really two key ideas. One of them is leveraging GPUs, which were originally designed for graphics, but increasingly are just great for running machine learning. And the second, which you'll hear Tyler talk about in a few minutes, I'm sure, are specialized pieces of hardware or accelerators that are designed to run machine learning from the ground up, such as Google's TPU. We do need to be careful here, though. Paradoxically, as we design more efficient hardware, we also run into the problem where people buy more of that hardware to run bigger problems. So making more efficient hardware by itself is not necessarily sufficient to solve this problem. But we're also pursuing a whole host of other techniques. You heard Lena mention this, but we're looking at ways to design smaller models that have the accuracy of larger ones, but fit on smaller devices or use reduced precision. We're also looking at advanced cooling techniques, water, mineral oil immersion, amongst others, as well as looking at smarter ways to partition data across the computers we need to run them on, or write really efficient code to run these workloads. So the bottom line is, while we've done a lot of work to make more energy efficient hardware, there's a long way to go, and a lot of further continuous improvement is going to be needed. And with that, I'll let the other three talk about their pieces, but I'm happy to answer questions about this kind of stuff at the end. Thanks for listening.
All right. Well, great. Thank you, Matt. So we will go on to our next panelist, who is here remotely, Costa Samaras, who is the director of the Carnegie Mellon University Scott Institute for Energy Innovation, a trustee professor of civil and environmental engineering, and an affiliated faculty member in the Department of Energy and Public Policy. His research focuses on pathways to clean, climate-safe, equitable, and secure energy and infrastructure systems. And he analyzes how technologies and policies affect energy use and national security, resilience to climate change impacts, economic and equity outcomes, and life cycle environmental emissions and other externalities. So he has founded a lot of he's done a lot of interesting work. He's the founder and director of both the Center for Engineering and Resiliency for Climate Adaptation and the Power Sector Carbon Index. And he's also served as, from 2021 to 2024, in the White House Office of Science and Technology Policy as the Principal Assistant Director for Energy. OSTP Chief Advisor for Energy Policy, and then OSTP Chief Advisor for the Clean Energy Transition. So clearly a lot of experience with both technical and policy aspects. And so Costa, we are so happy that you are here with us today. Looking forward to hearing your remarks.
Thank you so much for that really gracious introduction, Professor Rold. And thank you to Lulu and Scott and the WEI team. It's really a phenomenal organization that is doing work at the leading edge of energy. I want to talk just very briefly, and then I'm really looking forward to the Q&A. Why do we care about data center energy? Well, we care because we have to get to zero emissions. And we have to get to zero air pollutants, and we have to get to zero waste. We have to get to zero. And so these are the emissions trajectories of the United States that the Biden administration submitted to the United Nations right at the end of the administration. And it shows that with the current policies that the Biden-Harris administration passed, if everything was implemented and if the Inflation Reduction Act and bipartisan infrastructure law stayed, we would get to about 29 to 46% below 2005 emissions levels by the end of the decade, and then maybe by 2040 getting to 30 to 60% below 2005 emissions. But so that's not zero, but it is good. And so that was a good trajectory that we were on. And in order to stay on that, we have to continue to electrify, deploy clean energy, and maximize energy efficiency, but also deal with new loads that are coming in from new energy sources such as data centers. Next slide, please. So this is a graph that some of our colleagues at Carnegie Mellon and elsewhere had made in a paper from a few years ago that really helps us think about where we fit on this landscape. So today we're talking about data center energy, and that's really in the middle of that circle A. And so we are using electricity to turn we're using electricity to run through computers to turn into money or to turn into information. And so that's the data center part of it. And what we do with that depends on how we make choices in the rest of the society. What does it do to our electricity grid? What does it do for transportation? What does it do for industry and materials and agriculture? And so there is an emissions penalty for using electricity in the middle circle. And then there's a ripple effect that happens in the rest of society in the second circle. And then there's a bigger ripple effect of how do we rearrange society? Do we change the way that we are working? Do we change the way that we are commuting? Do we change where we're living? And so the first step of understanding how AI affects the climate and the economy is understanding how much energy we're putting in the data center part in the middle. Next slide, please. So we saw Matt show the analysis of where data center energy electricity is going to be or projected to be by the next few years. Both of these are from the recent Lawrence Berkeley Laboratory report on data centers. And so the notion is like, how big is a terawatt hour is kind of sometimes a terawatt hour freaks us out. Is how big is it? I love the light bulb comparison that Matt talked about. I like to think about a kilowatt hour as running a microwave for an hour. And then a terawatt hour is a billion of those, right? And so what we could have by the end of 2028 is all of data center electricity between 6% and 12% of U.S. electricity in the next few years. And so you can see it like going back to 2014, we were using the internet a lot. And so 2015 to 2023, total internet traffic around the entire world went up by 6x, but the energy to run the internet only went up by 2x. And that's because of lots of efficiency and advances in cooling and growth in scale. But now we're adding this AI layer on top of it. And so AI gets us a lot of new computation, but we're spending a lot of electricity to do it. So now we have to figure out what are we going to do about this challenge and as it grows going forward. Next slide, please. Now, I want to stress that electrifying the economy is good. Electrifying the economy is great. It's something actually essential in order for us to meet our climate objectives. And so when we look at projections through the next 15 years or so, how much of the electricity demand growth is currently projected to be AI and data center related? It's about 20 to 22%. About half is going to be from cars, another 15% from buildings, another 15% from industry. And so one of the things I think about is we have to figure out how to manage the data center electricity challenge, because that's the small part of the electrification challenge. And if we can't figure out that without increasing emissions, we got no chance on cars and buildings and factories. Next slide, please. So my colleagues at OSTP, they released a principles for AI Bill of Rights, and so things around safe and effective systems and privacy and equity and discrimination protection. I've been thinking about like what does a climate amendment to the AI Bill of Rights look like, and so I think about these principles that we should be demanding and putting forward. So hey, let's not raise people's electricity bills. Let's make sure that energy equity goes up and not down. And make sure that we're adding more clean power to the grid than we use, and that we rebuild the entire architecture of our grid system that is 120 years old, that we are relying on now to get us to decarbonization. We also need to have open data and rising efficiency targets. We should have a miles per gallon standard for data centers, although Matt did mention no matter how efficient we make data centers, we're always going to want more. Because it's gonna there's a benefit from higher compute, and so we have to figure out maximizing efficiency and making sure that doesn't add local pollution and is net zero emissions, and it really is beneficial to the local community. Next slide, please. So I think if we think about principles for climate safe AI, I think we can think about it like this: clean, affordable, reliable, equitable. We start there, and then we build out what we want for a digitized and electrified society. One of my internet friends pointed out this acronym spells out CARE. So if we take CARE and we think about deploying AI infrastructure in a way that is clean, affordable, reliable, and equitable, we will maximize the benefits and minimize some of the risks. Thanks, and looking forward to the questions.
All right. Thank you very much, Costa. So we will move to our next panelist, which is Tyler Hubner. Tyler leads Google's energy market development efforts in the Upper Midwest. And so he's helping the company grow data center and AI operation while also pursuing the 24/7 carbon-free energy goals. So previously, Tyler was a governor-appointed commissioner at the Public Service Commission of Wisconsin, where he was regulating the state's electricity, natural gas, and water utilities, and also supported an ambitious broadband expansion initiative. So a lot of experience from across many different infrastructures. Tyler's early career included consulting at ICF International, 2 years at the U.S. Department of Energy, and as executive director at Renew Wisconsin. So Tyler, we're very happy you're here with us today.
Great. Thank you for the warm welcome. It's good to be back here. I've been here many times before in previous roles. And so thank you again for the invitation to speak here today in my role at Google. Next slide. Show of hands in the room. Has anybody used a Google product in the last 24 hours? Okay, Google. How about Gmail? Anybody use Gmail? Most people. Google search. YouTube. Oh, come on. Wisconsin Energy Analysis and Policy, and he hasn't used YouTube in the last. He must be studying really hard. He's working hard. So Google has about 7 products, maybe more now, that have 1 billion users across the globe. So I don't know how we measure that, every month or something, monthly average users, 1 billion people. So incredible scale, incredible reach, and we really pride ourselves on building great products, most of which are free. And we've developed obviously revenue models to sort of operate our business, but we've done this in a spirit of supporting the growth of society and the growth of kind of people across the globe. So we're excited about the products that we build. However, I'll show a slide in a couple seconds what the growth in users has done to our energy use. my former colleague, Michael Vickerman, is in the office, and he and I worked, I was there for about 7 years, but Michael worked for almost 30 at a nonprofit called Renew Wisconsin, where we focused on renewable energy. And a lot of our work in our early days was how do we get solar on people's homes and get policies, incentives, net metering, things like this. But a good installation of solar on your home starts with energy efficiency. It starts with making sure that you're maximizing the amount of energy and the benefit of that energy that you're using in your house, so that when you put solar panels on, you don't need to put more solar panels than you need because you've already kind of right-sized the load. Google goes about building our data centers in the same way. So our data centers are about 1.8 times more efficient, or as efficient as a typical data center, even though there's about 4 times the computing power in those as there was 5 years ago. As Matt mentioned, we also have developed our own what we call TPUs, which is a different kind of processing unit. And those we're continuing to make more efficient as well. So 67% more efficient than our previous generation with our current generation of chips that we make. So as you can kind of see on the bar chart there, we really strive ourselves on being as efficient as possible with the data centers that we build. We do not have any data centers in Wisconsin, just so that you know. Our closest data center to here is in Iowa, and that is our largest set of data centers in the whole country, and in fact, in the whole world, is in the western part of Iowa, in Council Bluffs, Iowa. So next slide, please. As we've all used more products from Google over the past 15 years, the electricity use required for the company to meet all those searches and Gmails and YouTube videos in particular has grown year over year over year. And that's what's shown kind of in the top mark bar that continues to grow. In the last few years, AI, ML has become an increasing part of the energy use and the products and services that we're doing. Has anybody noticed the AI overviews that you get in Google search now? Okay, raise your hand. Are those better? Are they improving your Google search experience? Anybody? Is it worse? I mean, this is not an official survey, but it's worse. Okay, we'll send that to the top brass that people are not excited about it. Okay. So we, for a company for a long time, have been very conscious of our energy use and water use, and set really ambitious goals. And so anybody heard of a private corporation signing a wind or a solar contract called a PPA, or a power purchase agreement? Okay, so Google did the first one in the country about 15 years ago. We signed contracts before anybody else had done it. So we really put the staff time, the consultant time into figuring out how do you even sign a contract. You're not a utility. You're just a private company. Now that model has been scaled. We do a ton of them, but so does everybody else. Amazon, Microsoft, you name it. There's hundreds of companies doing these power purchase agreements all across the country and across the globe. We set goals first on an annual basis to match the amount of energy that our data centers use and our operations use with renewable, non-carbon emitting energy year to year. And you can see the progress that we made there in the green bars. So we steadily made our way towards actually achieving that goal, which we did. The first year was 2017. In 2020, however, and you can go to the next slide here, we set a more audacious goal, recognizing that our data centers are basically running around the clock at fairly steady loads, okay? Whereas the wind generation that we've contracted for, the solar generation, is super great when it's windy, super great when it's sunny, but our data centers are operating at all times, even when the wind dies down, et cetera. So we set a new goal. Really, it's the most ambitious goal in the world, which is to match our energy use with clean energy every single hour on the grids that we operate. And we want to get that done by 2030. And we're growing our load in the meantime. So this is a very ambitious goal, but we have made significant progress towards achieving this, as you can kind of see, especially in North America and Europe. So these are the hour by hour. Across the globe, we're at 64%. So 64% in the grids that we operate of the usage at those data centers is being matched today with clean energy in those hours. And we have work to do, certainly in the US and Europe. We're not at 100%, but a lot of our operations where we don't own data centers in a lot of Asia, but we do obviously have services there. And so we contract for those. Those markets are a little bit harder to figure out how to get clean energy and especially kind of clean firm technologies to support us, but we are actively working on that basically all across the globe at all times. And then my final slide is some of the unique partnerships that we are pursuing to help us meet this goal. Because one of the things that we really believe in at Google is kind of putting our money where our mouth is. So just like we did that first corporate PPA 15 years ago, we're signing deals now for technologies that nobody else has done. So we're signing deals for what we call advanced geothermal. So this is in Nevada where we have a data center. So how do we get geothermal energy at scale? We've signed a deal to do that. Advanced nuclear, so small modular reactors. We've signed an agreement with a company called Kairos Power to pilot and hopefully build up to 500 megawatts of small modular reactors that could be sited around the country. And then our latest announcement is with a couple of developers and financiers called TPG and Intersect Power, where we're going to build data centers next to the wind and solar farms that they've already either built or have approval to build. So sort of finding the spots on the grid where there is clean energy and then putting our data centers there. What we've identified is it's going to be easier to find the right spots on the grid and the clean energy on the grid and sort of link the fiber to those points. The data centers need fiber to move the data around. Than it is to sort of put the data center where it's optimal from a fiber optics perspective and add clean energy later. That is much more difficult. So we're excited about the progress we're making, happy, and look forward to the questions at the end. On to you, Amy.
Thank you very much, Tyler. So then we will go to our last speaker, Amy Barillo. Am I saying?
Barrio, close.
Barrio, yeah. Who is the communications director or the communications director at Clean Wisconsin, where she oversees all Clean Wisconsin as external communication strategy. Including media relations, public affairs, content marketing, digital advertising, and social media. She also is a podcast host for Clean Wisconsin's State of Change podcast. She has served on the National Public Affairs Council of the American Water Works Association and was also the chair of the Image and PR Committee of the Wisconsin section of the American Water Works Association. So she is frequently speaking about source water protection and crisis communication at conferences across the region and country, including the U.S. Water Alliance, One Water Summit, the Symposium on Water Research for Wisconsin, the Midwestern Legislative Conference, and Mid-America Regulatory Conference. So she has worked as an award-winning journalist in television, print, radio news, and she leans on that vital storytelling experience every day to engage new audiences. And so we are very excited to hear your stories here today and also bring the important perspective of water into the conversation.
Right. Yes, sorry that bio was so long. I forget that people want to read that thing. Thank you for being here today. And again, I'm with Clean Wisconsin. We are the oldest, longest running environmental advocacy group in Wisconsin. We've been championing our environment and our environmental protection since 1970. So if you care about protecting the environment, if you care about protecting a livable climate, you're probably pretty stressed out right now. We're just coming off of another record-breaking warmest year in 2024. We just saw the most expensive, most devastating climate disaster in U.S. history in Los Angeles. And we're starting to feel that pressure, that urgency, that we need to cut greenhouse gas emissions in a big way as quickly as possible. And the first step to doing that, as Tyler mentioned, is to reduce demand. It is the quickest, cheapest, easiest thing to do to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. That's why you see so many energy efficiency programs rolling out as part of the Inflation Reduction Act, the federal climate law, because reducing demand works. And into this critical, urgent moment in human history walks AI. Or I should say runs AI, because as we're seeing, it's happening really, really fast. In Wisconsin, in the last 8 months, we've had 2 AI data centers announced the Microsoft data center in Mount Pleasant, and then another data center being built by a Houston, Texas developer on 2,000 acres in Port Washington. There's also been recently announced a smaller data center cluster in Kenosha, which is another Microsoft project. All three of those projects are in the We Energy service territory. And I think to understand the environmental impacts of AI, we can just look and see how this is unfolding right here in Wisconsin. So we can go to the next slide. So the data center that's furthest along in Wisconsin is the Microsoft data center, 450 megawatts. It will be the state's largest electricity user when it's completed. Power needs equal to 300,000 homes. So that's more homes than there are in Dane County, more homes than in Milwaukee, more homes than in Oshkosh, Appleton, and Green Bay combined. So this is going to be kind of like a city's worth of energy needs in the next couple of years. There's also going to be 186 diesel backup generators on site for the Microsoft data center. It's important to note that Microsoft will not participate in any demand response programs, so it needs 100% of data load demand 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. I mentioned that this is in the We Energy service territory, and that's important because We Energies does not have a history of being a leader on clean energy. Less than 3% of its energy mix comes from clean wind and solar, and it famously built one of the newest coal plants in the country 15 years ago here in Wisconsin. So We Energies sees this data center coming and announces, next slide, a $2 billion methane gas plant build out, it says, to meet the demand. So this includes a couple of new methane burning power plants. It includes a liquid natural gas storage facility, a pipeline. And this gas plant or build out has a lifespan of 30 years. And we know we don't have 30 years to have a bunch of new fossil fuel burning in Wisconsin if we want to meet our climate goals in Wisconsin. But beyond the climate goals, we have to think about what pollutants are going to be coming from these power plants. Next slide. So there's a long list of expected air pollution from the We Energies gas plants. Now, I should note that these plants are before the Public Service Commission for approval, so they have not been approved yet. If they are approved, we know that there's going to be hundreds of tons of nitrogen oxides, which can cause ozone and particulate matter every year that these gas plants are in operation. Next slide. And thanks to our partners at Healthy Climate Wisconsin, they've been able to turn some of that pollution data into health data. So over the lifetime of these gas plants, we're looking at billions of dollars in health costs, 351 premature deaths, 858 asthma cases, 93 heart attacks. And the reason why I bring this up is because Microsoft, much like Google, has climate goals. They want clean energy. They have plans to have clean energy support their data centers, but they don't control what We Energies does. We Energies has an incentive, a financial incentive to build $2 billion worth of gas plants because it gets a 12.5% rate of return profit on its construction costs. So you're seeing not just in this case, but all over the country, utilities opting for a gas plant build out because they'll make money off of it and they can do it quickly. So that is a real world example of some of the environmental costs that we're seeing. I want to, next slide, kind of broaden out to like the more global water impacts. There's not as much transparency around water use, but and AI data centers have a big water footprint for a lot of reasons. But one reason is because water is used to cool data centers. It's chilled, clean, potable water typically. And AI is accelerating that data center water use. So to give an example, Chat GPT, which I gotta imagine is being used right now all across this campus, consumes 17 ounces of water for every 5 to 50 prompts, depending on what that is. So that's about, almost this full water cup that would be consumed or evaporated per prompt. So in 2 years, AI water use is expected to hit 4.2 to 6.6 billion cubic meters. To give you an idea of what that means, it's about 5 Denmark's worth of annual water consumption. So it's a lot of water and growing. Next slide. And I've seen this referred to as the cloud that never rains, right? The data center use. So in 2023, we have to note that water scarcity is becoming a real hard thing, a real issue because of climate change. So for example, in 2023, Uruguay was experiencing a record drought. And that sparked a backlash against Google because Google was planning a data center that was going to use millions of gallons of water every day to cool the data center. And that water was going to be taken directly from the public water system. And so there were protests and there was an outcry. And so Google changed its plans to use less water and more energy to cool that data center. For here in Wisconsin, Microsoft says it's using some kind of a water recycling technology, and it will only need water from on the peak days, the hottest days of the year, and at that time it'll be 350,000 gallons of water a day on the hottest days of the year. Which I would just note is the time when our water systems are the most stressed is on the hottest days of the year. So that's an example, I think, of what some of the impacts, the environmental impacts of AI are, but I'm happy to answer your questions, and thank you.
All right, thank you very much. So I would like just to also, of course, we will take questions from the audience here. We also have for our online participant an opportunity to post questions to the Q&A chat that we will be monitoring to take those questions as well. So anyone who wants to ask questions, think of them now. But I will take the sort of liberty here as a moderator to also ask a couple of questions, start out with a couple of questions for our panelists. So Amy, I would like to actually continue with a direct follow-up on your presentation. So you had very kind of detailed estimates of like what does it mean or like in terms of health impacts with the emissions from new gas plants. Could you talk a little bit about like what does the water impacts actually mean regionally here in Wisconsin if we have that increase? Yes.
That's all right. We're working to understand what it means. So Wisconsin is part of the Great Lakes Compact, which Clean Wisconsin played a big role in creating, I think about 20 years ago. And that means that all the states in the Great Lakes region have a responsibility to protect our water resources here. And so you might have heard Michigan just signed a big, I think, AI welcome wagon law where they're going to give some incentives for AI data centers. Well, Michigan is part of that Great Lakes Compact. And so I think there's starting to be some concern, like who's minding the store here? We have a responsibility to protect the water resources in the Great Lakes watershed. And as you see more and more of these data centers coming in, it's not always clear how much water is going to be used. We don't know how much water the new 2,000-acre data center up in Port Washington is going to use. It's right on Lake Michigan. We don't always know where they're going to pull the water from. Is it going to be from a potable drinking water system? Is it going to be from groundwater? We've had issues with in the Central Sands region of Wisconsin with groundwater actually lowering lake levels because of irrigation. So these are all things we need to pay attention to. And there's not a ton of clarity on how much some of these data centers are going to use or how many are coming, how many are around the corner. And that's something that I think, requires more thought from our leaders as we start greenlighting these data centers.
Right, thank you. Did you have a follow-up or a kind of a question related to that? Yeah.
At 350,000 gallons per day, only on hottest days, according to Microsoft. The problem with that is they're only talking about the water use on premise and evaporating towers. Fact of the matter is, depending on the state, anywhere from a half a gallon, 4 gallons per kilowatt hour is consumed at the power plant. And that is far exceeds any water consumption.
Yes, thank you for mentioning that.
Yeah, so we have a comment here in the audience I missed your name, but who's commenting that a lot, there's the direct water use for cooling a data center, but then there's also the water cooling impacts of power generation infrastructure. So yeah.
That's right. Yeah. So I think that's an important thing to mention. The data center footprint extends well beyond just what's used in the cooling tower. So sometimes we only see a piece of what an AI data center is really going to use.
Great, yeah, thanks. Okay, and so I also would like to direct a question to Costa online here to bring you into the conversation as well. Costa, in your presentation, you mentioned that data centers are not the only source of like increased electric load. We have other sort of sources of electrification that are also projected to significantly increase our use of electricity. But I was wondering if you can comment on, if you have any thoughts on like sort of the speed at which the data centers are being built out relative to some of these other kind of electrification loads, and if there's anything there or anything else in that you would like to comment on.
Well, thanks, and really great to be on this panel with such great and interesting presentations. Professor Rold hit it right on the head with that with the question, is that electricity use from data centers may not be a lot across the entire economy, but it's a lot in a local economy, and it's a lot that can happen quickly. And so that is the same kind of challenge with digital assets, is that these are things that can grow very rapidly and result in potentially raised electricity prices or local pollution or other emissions. Now, the bigger challenge is electrifying, our vehicles and our homes and our businesses. Those need to happen rapidly, but they're more distributed and they will happen over time. And so managing the rapid growth of new loads from, when we say data centers and AI, we can think of it just like the internet, right? I mean, the data centers, AI, the internet are all the same infrastructure. They're running different types of loads, but managing our digital economy in a way that protects local communities and enables our climate goals is paramount. And it's the speed and the quickness that is getting everybody to pay attention.
Yeah, thanks for commenting on that, Costa. All right, so I would like to also open up the question here. I will start to our audience. I will start with one question that is online, which is whether or not there is an optimal size for a data center and if there is a limit to efficiency improvements of data centers. And particularly on that efficiency improvements and limits to that, Matt, I was wondering if you have any comments you'd like to make.
I guess at the limit, there's the speed of light, right? So, we can only go that fast now. I don't think we'll ever get there, but in terms of an optimal size, that's probably a better question for Tyler than I, but in terms of efficiency improvements, more sincerely, the best case we could have is like every piece of compute that the processor has is doing some useful piece of work at all times, whatever that limit is. And there's a whole bunch of factors. I know not everybody gets into hardware here, so I won't go into all those details, but whatever that limit is what I would imagine the limit would be. And whomever wrote this question, we could probably try and do a calculation offline to figure out what that is. But I guess the reason why I can't give it a hard number there is the other part of it is you heard Tyler mention also companies are designing these application specific pieces of hardware, these accelerators like the TPU, while inevitably they'll run up to some point where the TPU can only do so much, and the TPU 20 or whatever comes in the future. That's not to say that we won't design another accelerator designed to run some other machine learning workload efficiently in the future. So that's why I guess my joke was that the limit is the speed of light, but more practically, I guess the limit would be how much useful work can we be doing in a processor at a time. And to go back to that example I gave before, in the light bulb versus the NVIDIA GPU, I think those GPUs in that study they said are like 68% utilized right now. So that tells you, like, in theory, you could make them 32% more used in a system today, at least based on the study that was conducted. So that gives you some idea of how much more efficient we can make it. But yeah, I think it's going to depend a lot on the workloads you're running, the application design and so on. I don't know if you want to add about the ideal size of it.
Well, I can just talk a little bit about Google's experience. So I think in a trend line sort of fashion, the company, and I think you're kind of seeing with Microsoft's proposal too, is like there's a lot of efficiencies for a Google, a Microsoft, and Amazon to build a larger data center rather than 3 or 5 or 7 smaller ones. And there's cooling efficiencies that come with that, water use efficiencies, energy efficiencies, workforce efficiencies, et cetera, that we've identified for our company. And especially as we look at like the AI and the ML, it is the situation where, at least at present, and I'm not a computer scientist, it is my understanding that the models that are being built are kind of the larger the better at this point. More data points. I mean, that's kind of where we're starting to see the breakthroughs and some of the advances that, again, I'm not an expert, but if you think of like Google's DeepMind, if you kind of follow those folks, those are the folks that are kind of on the leading edge. And actually the folks that founded DeepMind just won a Nobel Prize this year for their work on protein folding in a product called AlphaFold 2, which is like one of the first real examples of AI breakthrough that's having really outstanding impact right now on discovering new drugs and solving diseases and things that we've been trying to do as humanity for decades, if not centuries. So those are some of the applications that Google, for one, is really excited about. How can we use AI to really benefit humanity? Some of the other work we've done is how do we use AI to optimize the grid? How do we use AI to actually get more efficiency out of the grid and out of the energy that we're producing and the energy that we're using? So I don't want to sound Pollyannish and gloss over the challenges, which are real, and the challenges, at least for Google, that we're taking extraordinarily seriously, how to right-size our data centers and be as sustainable as possible.
Just to add one, comment there, I alluded to this on my slide, but at least from what we publicly know, it is worth pointing out that the scaling of the model size appears to be slowing down. Now, not everybody is so forthcoming about their model sizes, so under the hood, maybe they're still scaling. And in part, I think the reason they're having a problem with that is they're kind of running out of data to train on. Like, so, I mentioned like YouTube and whatever, get more and more data, but there's only so much insight you can mine out of that. So there probably will be an asymptote there at some point. And when you reach that asymptote, as in addition to some new machine learning models, for example, there's a new style that's come out called mixture of experts, which I won't get into the details of, but people have shown that you can train smaller models on them that have relatively the same accuracy as some of these bigger ones. So that is an active area of work, is like, how can we make just as good models that are smaller? And that won't by itself solve all of the questions you're implying there, but it does help to some extent.
Great, yeah, so questions out here, I can.
Thanks. My name is Michaela Cliche. I'm with the Public Service Commission of Wisconsin. And my question is about the technology development. I really appreciate the conversation about efficiency. And we've had recent news about how AI technology has evolved quickly. There's obviously quite a big demand and a big rush from the big tech industries to develop a lot of energy infrastructure that would theoretically be around for a really long time. And there's a lot of uncertainty about where that technology development will go. So my question is actually about quantum computing. I'm wondering, like, can quantum do the same things as AI? Does it use the same amount of energy? Are we going to be building a bunch of energy infrastructure for then there to be this like burst of quantum that then will change what that should look like? And what do we do from a regulatory standpoint with those stranded assets potentially, right?
Okay.
Yeah, quantum.
So I don't know if you work with the guy who sits right next to me in the computer science building, but if so, I'm sure he'll put your check in the mail for that question. So because he works on quantum computing. This is just my opinion, at least. Let's say in the next 15 years would be my guess. Maybe longer term it will change, but I view quantum computing as another accelerator. So you heard about Google's TPU or the GPUs that AMD and NVIDIA and so on design. Just like them, quantum computing is incredibly good at very, very specific tasks and essentially inept at anything that does not fit in that classification of tasks. I have not seen anyone yet, although I'm not an expert, but I haven't seen anybody yet show that you could run an AI model in a quantum, computer. I'm sure there's somebody, in the comments or whatever that will point out, somebody that I'm not aware of, but I would view it as solving different kinds of problems, at least in the near future. Maybe in the long term, it'll have some opportunities there, but it's going to be another, one in the pile of GPU, TPU, so on in the short term. And that's not necessarily a good or bad thing. It's just kind of a different thing for different applications.
Okay, now to the regulatory fund. Okay, who's heard of a stranded asset? Okay, over half of you. Okay, it's an excellent question. And thank you for asking it, because Google has really been thinking a lot about this over the past 6 to 12 months. And we've really done a 180 as a company. So historically, what we've tried to do is find utility companies that have extra power generation, ideally clean. And we would go inside data centers with those utilities where they didn't have to build new electric generation to serve us. Essentially, there are no utilities like that left in the United States. Between us and all of our competitors and companies like us, we've all gone to all of those utilities, and they all now are saying, we have no spare power plant or portion of a power plant or system capacity to sell you. So we're gonna have to build you a new power plant, or we're gonna have to build you a new transmission line. And historically, a company like Google would not really want to be on the hook for the risk of our business saying, okay, you're gonna go build a $2 billion power plant, and we don't want to be on the hook for paying that if our business changes our mind and we don't want to build in that site, or we don't want to build as much as we said. We've actually done a 180 and decided, yes, we actually should be, for many of the reasons that that Costas mentioned, is that we actually have to show up, because the risk of whether our load grows and shows up in that utility is really our business risk, and it should not be pushed on to other ratepayers. And so we've settled in different jurisdictions in the last month to month and a half, 2 months, with like 5 different utilities. And let me list you a name of some states. And Michael, you can give me a sense of whether you see these as regulatory leaders in the among the 50 states. West Virginia, Utah, Ohio, and Indiana. We've all settled with parties and proposed settlements to their commission saying, these new customers like us should be on the hook for like 70 to 80%, but around 75% of that cost of new generation. So there's some fluff in there that, our load's not going to quite maybe grow as much as we said, and there might be benefits to other customers from having extra generation. There might be reliability benefits. Maybe they could attract another customer to use it. But we really shouldn't be having that utility spend $2 billion. And then if we don't come and use that, have all the other customers on the hook for that. We should be on the hook for basically $1.5 billion out of that too. So those settlements are in front of commissions. We'll see if they get approved or not, but it's really been a sea change in trying to address this exact question of how do you sort of mitigate this risk of these large loads coming in, like as big as a city, as you said, kind of taking a significant amount of electric generation. And we've sort of evolved to say, we really need to be responsible and tell our business that, hey, if you're going to commit to come to this utility, you need to show up. And so that's the pivot we've made. So thanks.
All right, great. I think there's a comment.
Yeah, I was just going to add, building back to that last question, Chad Cape with Liquid Cool Solutions, on what the optimal size. Hello, can you hear me?
There's no application.
You won't hear it here. Okay. What the optimal size is for a data center, and I think just like there's not one right shoe for any foot. There's probably not one right size for any data center optimally. However, I'll be frank in saying This device here has a power usage effectiveness of 103. And Costa was wonderful in pointing out that Berkeley Labs just put out a report that said data centers can range anywhere from 191 for small to medium colos at 168. Hyperscalers and AI get down in the 120s maybe before you adjust for board fans, which actually increases 2 to 20% the error in the PUE. So, but what that does not talk about is one real important thing about how we're cooling data centers today. And who in the audience has a coffee mug in their car that keeps the coffee hot as you drive in on your commute or walk to classes? I think we all have those. And that's because the air is a great insulator. So you have a double-walled insulator keeping the hot heat in the coffee. And the problem with that is air is an insulator. It's the last thing you should use to move heat away from a data center or anything that generates heat. So what's neat about using liquid is you can elevate the cooling temperature from an air-cooled data center goes from 70 to 105. 105 is nuisance rejected heat that no one can do anything with or enjoy unless you live in Arizona and Nevada and you like that. With liquid cooling, because it's 1,400 times better than air at carrying heat, you can elevate the operating temperature cooling medium to 140, which is above hot water heater set points or building heat. So the comment that I would make again is hyperscalers are great in some instances on the one hand. On the flip side, you can never reuse the heat of a hyperscale data center because there's no place to go with 300 megawatts of heat. Conversely, if you have 301 megawatt micro data centers or 600, 500 kilowatt data centers around Milwaukee or Madison, you can cut the PUE below 103 really in half. So I'd encourage the public service commissioners and every all the bright minds in here to think about moving from air, which is no longer possible to heat or cool some of the higher pressure or high density power thermal chips that are coming out from NVIDIA, AMD, and Intel. And I apologize for going there too much, but it's a big deal. And Jensen Wang and others are moving to liquid cooling in some instances, but those are hybrid methods where it's half air and half liquid as opposed to polar.
Can you introduce yourself just so we know?
Yeah, again, it's Chad Cape with Liquid Cool Solutions. We're a small startup in Rochester, Minnesota. We have 65 patents. And actually, we got a neat thing with NYSERDA, heat recovery programs. Working elsewhere with in Wisconsin.
Good, thank you very much. I think we need to move on. Yeah. I mean, do you have something you wanted to add there, Manu?
No, we can keep it. It's fine.
Okay. Yeah, so we have a few questions online related to ethics of AI and how these if there are sort of forums where such ethics guidelines are being developed and also whether they are being put into practice. And Costa, since you were talking about this during your remarks, could you tell us a little bit about, do you see these ethics and AI principles getting adopted? And if so, in what way?
Well, the conversation around ethics and AI has necessarily focused on things like rights and privacy, speech, discrimination, and things that we hold dear as civil society. What I'm proposing is that we expand that and also include rights for livable climate and rights for energy equity and rights for environmental health and reduce pollution. And so there is a rich debate around what is the value of a kilowatt hour of electricity use? Is it good that somebody's using a AI to generate text for a homework assignment or generate an image because they want to do some movie generation? I mean, these are questions that I leave to the ethicists. As a engineer and policy analyst, we just have to ensure that our digitized future leaves a livable climate future, and I'm very confident that we can, if we are deliberate and we include these from the beginning. And I think that is something where we've heard a couple of the comments about the ways that different size data centers use energy and water differently. And so just to highlight the difference, it used to be that a data center would use you need to put a kilowatt hour in to cool it and a kilowatt hour in to run the system. And so now with the bigger hyperscalers and AI specialized data centers, you would put in a kilowatt hour in to run the chips and the servers, and then another 0.1 or 0.3 kilowatt hours in to run the cooling in the system. So we can make things more efficient, and we absolutely have to get to the most efficient possible and really move toward liquid cooling to get, reduce water use, period. But ultimately, it's as we're digitizing, what does that mean for not just the electricity use and the inside of the box? What does that mean for the rest of society for all the dimensions that we talked about?
Thank you. Do we have any other questions in the audience here? Yeah, over there.
Hi, thank you all for the great presentations. I'm Nick Mayu, a postdoc in the Nelson Institute. In all the discussions on AI and energy use, there's this air of inevitability about it, that like this is something that's going to happen whether or not we desire it, like if other people desire it, and like if it comes with these adverse climate impacts and health impacts, then that's just something we have to manage. But are there examples of people, whether within the regulatory space, nonprofit advocacy spaces, or anywhere, saying there are cases where we just want to say no, like, no, you don't get to build this data center here if it means these adverse impacts? Who are the people that are kind of on that cutting edge of thinking forward? I mean, Google doing the great work to say, we're going to make the commitment to like clean, firm generation and things like that. But obviously that's not the case with Microsoft and its deal that they're pursuing with We Energies. So, yeah.
Thanks. Yeah, and I think, and I would, with respect to Microsoft, I think Microsoft has the same sort of sensibilities as Google, and I think they're both in similar spots in terms of lack of real control over how utilities meet their energy demands. In terms of people who are saying no, I think what we should be doing is that we should demand that any entity that comes into our state bring benefits and does not harm our communities, does not derail our progress toward clean energy. We have to demand that. And what we're seeing is we don't have time to make these demands. We are finding out about AI data centers after the deals are already done. And we need to expect more of our lawmakers on the local level, on the state level. We need to expect more of our regulators at the Public Service Commission and elsewhere. And I think you can look to other countries. You can look to Ireland, where 20% of their energy use comes from data centers. And you're seeing the buyer's remorse there now. They passed laws saying that data centers have to be part of demand response programs because it's very hard to meet data center demand at 100% 24/7. And so you're seeing some pushback, some states starting to think about these things. But as I mentioned, AI is kind of running at us really quickly, whether we ask for it or not. Whether, if I don't want Google to show me that AI search, I have to type in -AI every time I search. Well, that's kind of a pain, right? So even if you don't like it, as I heard somebody say, you got it. You've got it on your phone. You've got it on your LinkedIn, on everything. And so I think it is being treated as inevitable. I don't know if there's a way to not have AI in your life, but I do think there's a way for our elected officials to make some responsible requirements when AI data centers come to town, and to think about the impact that these data centers are going to have, because these impacts will last for decades. That's what we're looking at here in Wisconsin.
Thanks, Amy. Costa, did you want to add to that?
Just saying that it's policymakers' responsibility to protect the public, protect the climate, maximize the benefits, of which there are many benefits to doing a deeper analysis across data that can improve our grid and improve our transit systems and improve our industrial systems, but also minimize the risk. And so this is where the kind of starting at a set of principles where data center entrants come in and bring their own clean power and bring enough to share and bring enough that is reinvesting in the grid. Very importantly, not making sure that the build out of infrastructure is as Tyler was mentioning, put on the backs of existing ratepayers in case things are changing and there are stranded assets. So ensuring that that the community wins and the community benefits is a key responsibility of public service commissions and state regulators and elected officials across the country.
Great, thanks for pointing that out. So we are running up towards the end here, unfortunately. I know there's many more questions online and questions also here in the audience, but I do want to give our panelists the opportunity to maybe share some closing thoughts here today. So yeah, I'll go maybe in the same order as we started. Matt, if you want to have a minute, so if you want anything you want to share.
Sure. Yeah, I know a lot of the questions we didn't quite get to on the web form here are for me, and you can feel free to email me or whatever, and we can talk about it after. But I guess what I was going to add here to this excellent conversation is, from a systems perspective, designing more efficient, approaches to doing this. I think it has to be more than just hardware. I think, we have to think about ways to integrate different mechanisms, maybe even, the electric grid, things that as a hardware designer, I've never personally thought about before, to have a more total solution. So, I think a lot of the answers here and a lot of the questions are kind of each coming from our area of expertise and talking about like what we can do. But I think it's not just one area. I think it's really a broader effort that's going to be needed here. So.
Online.
Yeah.
Thanks. Yeah. Thanks. Costa, do you want to also contribute some closing thoughts?
I'll be brief. And so first, a commercial. So our institute that I direct at Carnegie Mellon, the Scott Institute, we are having our Energy Week in March. And this year's theme is AI and energy, where we're diving into a lot of these different themes across the entire spectrum of the system. And so we're at cmu.edu/energy. So I will say, just to close here, there are key important policy measures, even if climate policy is now on hold or derailed or worse at the federal level, that states and local entities need to be leaders on. And making sure that our electrified economy and our new increasingly digitized economy works for everybody, doesn't increase people's bills, and works for the climate. It's doable. I mean, we have done big things before. We can do this as well. And if we set up our principles and ensure that this benefits communities, I'm confident there'll be a positive outcome.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think I said most of what I came to say. I really appreciate the opportunity to be part of the panel, even though, like I said, Google does not have operations here, but I am here locally, and it was a pleasure to hear all the questions and the discourse from my fellow panelists and the very engaged audience that we had. So thank you again for the opportunity, and look us up on the internet, Google data centers and our sustainability goals, and you can learn a lot more about what we've got going on. Thanks.
Yeah, I want to thank the invitation to be here and speak about the environmental impacts of AI and everything I've learned today from the other panelists. I want to note that if we're thinking about what's next here in Wisconsin, Alliant Energy has mentioned that it has signed some deals with some data centers. It hasn't released details on that, and has also signaled plans to build new gas plants. I think if you're concerned about what some utilities are planning with respect to how to meet any kind of energy demand in Wisconsin, then realize that there is a process that these gas plants must be approved by the Public Service Commission, and that there are comment periods, there are ways that you can plug in, and Clean Wisconsin can help you do that. That's a big part of our work. But otherwise, I thank you. If you have any other questions, I'll be here for a few minutes. Thanks.
Right, thank you. So we'll end with a big round of applause for our panelists. Thank you very much. And thank you, of course, again to everyone who's here today online and in person. So that will end the panel.